I decided to go to Libya and take up arms and fight in the revolution against Gaddafi. The hippie had become a warrior. We were vastly outnumbered, going up against tanks and planes. If you go to overthrow a government, you get caught, this is what happens to you. People just disappear and never come back. Electrocution. Pulling out fingernails. It was a prison break.
I'll be back. I promise.
But then he said that you will never see America again.
Welcome to the Casbah every day, everybody. People have been living behind these walls for over 1,000 years. Now, it's a really nice day, so we're going to go in and have a look. 1,000 years.
In February 2011, I was living in Baltimore, Maryland. I had just spent the previous 4 years traveling in North Africa and the Middle East, making a documentary film.
So this is still kind of like a town.
I traveled by motorcycle through Morocco, Mauritania, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan. The entire journey was over 35,000 miles. So I returned from the travels changed in a lot of ways. I had my girlfriend, Lauren. We were living together in Baltimore. All the adventure was out of my system by then. And finally, after all these years of being on the road, I was going to be able to settle down with her while finishing up the film. But I had no idea at that point that my life was about to change drastically.
After more than 40 years under the iron fist of Colonel Gaddafi, many Libyans have decided enough is enough. Protesters are now taking to the streets in droves to express their...
In mid-February, there were news reports coming out of Libya about the beginnings of the revolution against Gaddafi.
After several days of protest, many have now been killed here in their fight for freedom.
Of all the countries I traveled to, Libya was the place that I felt the strongest connection to people, that I made the best friendships. So one of my first thoughts was, how are my friends doing?
The death toll continues to rise.
So I contacted my friends from Libya that I'd been in touch with for years.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Tarek, I've been watching the news. What's going on, man?
People are dying, Matthew.
My friend Tarek had seen somebody shot right in front of him. Other friends had had neighbors killed, family members arrested.
We need help. America and Europe, we're doing nothing.
The U.S. government wasn't getting involved. Here were people trying to achieve their liberty, and they were being left to be slaughtered by the Gaddafi regime. How could I just sit at home on my sofa and watch this happen on TV to people I care about and do absolutely nothing? And that's when I said,
You know what? I'll be there.
I made the decision to go to Libya to take up arms and fight in the revolution against Gaddafi. I called my girlfriend at work and told her I was headed to Libya for the revolution, and she might want to come home early because I was leaving that day. She didn't like the short notice that she was getting, but she understood how I felt about Libya and why I was going.
I'll be back. I promise.
Better be.
So I bought a plane ticket and headed to Cairo. It was impossible to book a flight to Libya because Gaddafi controlled the airports. So I would have to cross illegally from Egypt into Libya by land. But I was determined to get into Libya and do what I could for the revolution. I wasn't going to accept no for an answer. I took a shared taxi with some Libyans, headed to Benghazi, in the heart of the revolution. This wasn't like the last time I'd been to Libya on a motorcycle. This was a completely different reason for going in different circumstances and a different cause. At that point, people in Benghazi had risen up and protested and joined the rebels. So a lot of the rebel fighters were citizen soldiers, guys that just days before had been working in a cafe or driving a taxi, and now they were fighters. So my thoughts were really on the cause and how I was going to find a unit to join. We arrived at the border crossing. Rebels had just taken over the border post recently. There was no visa system anymore. It was very different than what it used to be under Gaddafi, where the regime was in control. So entering the country, I thought, wouldn't be too much of a problem. But I knew it would be up to the attitude of the individual border guard.
You, where are you coming from?
I'm American, sir.
Your passport.
So it was a risk that I had traveled all this way and wouldn't actually be able to enter Libya.
Why you are in Libya?
I'm here to serve in the rebel army against Gaddafi.
Welcome to Libya.
I was just waved right through.
تحرك افتح تحرك.
Right into Libya we went. We drove nonstop all the way to Benghazi.
Basement.
When I arrived in Benghazi, things had changed a lot since the revolution started. The last time I had been in Libya, it had all the familiar symptoms of an authoritarian regime, posters on the walls of Gaddafi, people praising their dictator. Now there were caricatures spray painted on walls making fun of Gaddafi. People finally expressing their own feelings after decades of putting up a facade of support for him. When I arrived in Benghazi, I had nowhere to stay. So I called Nori, who's a friend I'd known for 4 years. I thought that'd be a place that I could stay. Last time I had seen him, he was essentially a hippie. He'd been traveling all around Africa for peace and love. Not the kind of guy that I thought would be involved in the revolution.
Javier, welcome back.
But Nori was very different than the last time I had seen him.
What happened to you, man?
I'm a rebel now.
The hippie had become a warrior.
So, what brings you back to Libya?
I told him, I'm here to help you fight for your freedom.
I want to fight in the revolution against Gaddafi.
Yeah, I've come to the right place.
They welcomed me right away. So I went with Nori and his friend Ali. to a military base. It was one of the Gaddafi compounds in the middle of Benghazi that had been ransacked by rebels. Nori and Ali introduced me to other rebels that formed the basis of our unit. So the plan was to collect weapons and ammunition that we needed,
Come inside, Matthew.
getting everything ready to go and fight. We found mortar tubes made in the USA. We got rocket-propelled grenade launcher. We got a Dushka, which is like a .50 caliber machine gun for mounting in our truck. So we were going to use whatever we found that we could in this fight. When I left the United States, I had thrown my camera in the bag. So I thought, while we're moving weapons and ammunition, I'll just set the camera up on something and film us.
This is for your grandchildren.
That way, the guys I'm with can show their grandkids how they overthrew Gaddafi.
This is the rebel base. Say hello, everybody. Hello. Hi. Nori, you remind me every day when we fight.
These were videos that I thought nobody outside my family would ever see.
We need to find a good base in Briga.
Once we had everything ready, the plan was that we'd travel to the front line. Gaddafi's forces had been progressing east, capturing town after town, and Briga was the next town that would be fought over. So we decided we were going to do recon in the town to figure out where we should set up our weapons, and Nori would remain at the base.
Everybody understand?
Yes.
Good luck.
The night before we went to Briga, Nori, Ali, and I had dinner. We heard stories from the front line.
I heard about some rebels.
Nori had heard that some rebels had been captured west of Briga and that Gaddafi's forces had burned 50 of them alive. So I consider capture to be the absolute worst thing. This was a matter of life and death.
This is the Last Supper.
Ali joked that this was our final meal alive before we went to Briga on this mission. At the time, I didn't know how close that joke was to what would actually happen. The next day, we said goodbye to Nori and went off to Briga. At that time, it was small groups of men taking a pickup truck and going to the front lines. So we were vastly outnumbered and outgunned and out-equipped, and we were really the underdog. But nobody was going to give up and nobody was going to turn back. We got to Briga. It was largely deserted, but there were still groups of some civilians around. Surprisingly, there was no sense that this was going to be the front line right away. We all believed that it would take time before Gaddafi would launch an attack on Briga. Then something happened that was sudden and unexpected. The next thing that I knew, I was waking up, being carried on a stretcher with my hands bound really tight. I'd suffered some sort of head injury, so I was in and out of consciousness. The truth is, I don't know what happened that day. I don't have a memory. I have this possible memory mixed with a dream. I think we were ambushed Gaddafi fighters approached the truck, and for whatever reason, I was hit and knocked unconscious. Then I woke up again, and I was being put in a cell. I had a bandage around my eyes and around my head. But I lifted it some to look from underneath it. There was a large bare room. I didn't know what had happened to the men I was with. I had to assume that they were in a similar situation as I was. The worst possible outcome was to be a prisoner of war under Gaddafi. The regime was known for physically torturing prisoners, imprisonment without trial, locking people up for very long periods of time. So being captured was my worst nightmare. It seemed like less than a day had passed since I'd been captured. I was escorted by a guard upstairs and put in a room and sat in a chair. There was an interrogator in front of me. I knew exactly what it looked like to them, but I hoped that there would be a way to convince them that I wasn't a rebel fighter.
What's your name?
Matthew Van Dyke.
American?
Yes.
So far, you tell the truth.
I had been captured along with my passport. So my strategy was to tell them things that I thought they would find out anyway.
Tell me, why you are in Libya?
So I said to him,
I spent the last 4 years traveling around North Africa and the Middle East making a documentary. I want to be a filmmaker.
But it just ended up digging my hole deeper.
I'm traveling with the rebels, and I'm filming them on missions. I've just been filming with them on nothing else.
Okay. Okay. So, you like films?
Yes.
They had the camera, everything needed to seal my fate. Clearly, I wasn't an observer, I was a participant.
Have you seen this film?
This is for your grandchildren. This is the rebel face. Say hello, everybody.
It was Nori and I said to him, Nori, you remind me every day why we fight. I was thinking there's no way that there's nothing I could even say in interrogation that would ever get me out of this.
What's going to happen to me now?
That's when he said,
You will never see America again.
There was no doubt to me then, and I was finished. I was taken out and transported to an airport. I had no idea where I was being taken. It was pretty clear that I was a condemned man. They led me into what was clearly an airplane. There were other people on the plane. I was sure that I was in a commercial airplane when I looked down and there were commercial seats. It wasn't a military aircraft. I was taken to my seat and sat down in the window seat. A male flight attendant came and brought a muffin to the guard and handed one to me.
Muffin?
Thank you.
And then he said,
Where are you from?
And I said, America.
Don't worry. They keep you maybe 2 weeks. Then you go home.
And he said that I would be released because Libya respects the rights of the human. It was his attempts, I think, to put me at ease. But the fact that he actually had no idea why I was detained meant that this guy knew absolutely nothing. The plane took off. During the flight, I looked out the window and saw the city. The flight attendant tried to joke with me. He said, "We're taking you to America." And I said, "No, you're not." And he said, "You're right, this is Tripoli."
Have you been to Tripoli?
And I said, "Yes." Tripoli is the capital of Libya, and it was Gaddafi's stronghold.
Welcome back.
I think he just made a joke to try to lighten me up a bit. For all I knew, that was my last interaction with a civilian that I might ever have outside of a prison system. Once I was in the lion's den, Gaddafi's seat of power, that there was not going to be any chance of escape from there. So, we landed in Tripoli. I was put in the back of a truck. I had no idea where I was being taken. I just knew it probably wasn't good. I don't remember exactly how long the ride was, but they took me out of the truck and led me into a building. They took the hood off, and I stood there, still with my head down and my eyes closed.
Welcome to Maktab al-Nasr.
I was in a prison called Maktab al-Nasr.
اقفل الباب.
Then they closed the door and walked away. It was a cell with nothing in it except a piece of foam on the floor and a blanket. From what I could tell, there were no other prisoners around. There was no noise. I was completely isolated. All over the walls were scribbled graffiti by previous prisoners. I could see the scratch marks for how many days they had spent there. The one that really stuck in my mind was 30 days. Even just that amount of time. It seemed unbearable. I looked at 30 days with real despair. I started using a piece of broken plastic spoon to carve days into the wall. I thought that another interrogation was at any moment. They would open up a little window in the door, hand me food through it. I never dared to talk to them or have any interaction with them. So there was no way to tell what they were thinking. That's part of what was so torturous about it. Psychologically, it was the not knowing. Then one night, I woke up and heard other prisoners being interrogated. They sounded like violent interrogations. And I thought, which night will be my night? I knew these sorts of things they would do. Electrocution. Beating the bottom of the feet. Pulling out fingernails. If you go to overthrow a government, you get caught, this is what happens to you. people would just disappear and never be seen again. Several days passed and I was still in the cell. Late at night, I would hear interrogations echoing through the prison. Each night, I needed to be ready because maybe at 3 in the morning, they would come and take me out of the cell. So I would rehearse in my mind my answers for when I would be next interrogated. I trimmed my fingernails down by biting them very low. And also did the same with my toenails so that they couldn't possibly rip out my nails. But I knew they had plenty of inventive ways to torture me besides that. The days went on and the solitary confinement continued without end. I began to wonder what the delay is. Why aren't they interrogating me? Why are they just leaving me in the cell day after day as if I don't exist at all? After about 6 weeks, it had reached a point of being unbearable. It started dawning on me that they don't have any more questions to ask me, and they don't particularly care. They've just locked me up and thrown away the key, basically. Make me disappear without anybody ever knowing. The hopelessness overrode the fear at that point. One of the most depressing thoughts was that I would miss the most important years of my life for starting a family. My girlfriend Lauren and I had been together for years. We had planned to spend the rest of our lives together, get married, have children. And all of that was essentially lost in an instant. Now we would be spending forever apart. I eventually tried to stop thinking of Lauren because it was just too painful. Now I had a very dark, determined fate. Then, when I was at my lowest point, something very strange happened. The guards' room was at the end of the hallway, and they had a television that I could hear. I started hearing talk of an American prisoner and a potential trade for his release.
The man, alleged to have been operating with rebel fighters, has been detained by Gaddafi's government since his arrest 6 weeks ago.
I was wondering, are they talking about me? Are they talking about another prisoner? And then I heard my name. All of a sudden, news of my capture had come out, and in grand fashion, like constant news reports.
An agreement has been reached for the release of
just in the last few hours, we got a message saying...
Suddenly, I could hear people yelling things outside the prison, and then I thought I heard Van Dike. Like, I heard my name pronounced wrong. Suddenly in my mind, people knew I was alive and I existed. The guards came into the cell.
عن الوقت يلا come.
And I was going home. I thought, this is it. I'm going to be put on a plane again, and this time I am going to America. I wasn't somebody that they had just thrown away the key and made me disappear. But then something very strange happened. I looked down the hall in each direction, and there was nobody there. It was all a hallucination. None of it was actually real. My mind broke it at my lowest point. My life was essentially over, that I was going to be in prison forever. But I definitely didn't want to give them complete power over life or death of me. I had always had in my mind that I wanted to finish strong. It was this phrase that kept coming in my mind, finish strong. So I had taken some yarn from the blanket and I used it to make a rope to take my own life. It's like feeling that things cannot possibly get worse, but then realizing that that is your reality forever. I had all sorts of internal conflicts with suicide. I thought about what life would be like if my life could go back to normal. And
be careful, okay?
Resuming my life with Lauren.
I'll be back. I promise.
Suicide became something I just couldn't bring myself to do. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. At that point, I'd been in prison 4 or 5 months. In solitary confinement all that time. My mind was desperate for anything except just my own thoughts. And then one day they brought a milk carton. That was from Germany. Reading ingredients in different languages. That was like the feeling you get when you get a Christmas gift. Because it was the closest thing I had to a book in all that time. Day after day went by in solitary confinement. I had spent pretty much all day, every day, sitting on the floor of the cell. And as a result, I became really unsteady on my feet.
Senna.
And then
تمشى.
the guard instructed me to walk back and forth in the hallway outside my cell.
تمشى تمشى.
It sounds like the most minor thing, but it was almost like a vacation because it took me out of the cell. After that, they would leave my cell door open for a while and they would lock the door at the end of the hallway. And then they brought me a bucket and a change of clothes, toothbrush and toothpaste. To finally be able to just sit in a chair, have some level of normal, everyday life. The impact of that was more than one can really imagine. Outside my cell, there was a hole in the ceiling to let light in that was completely open to the sky. I imagined what might be going on. Maybe there's an American satellite that could see through that hole and see my face. It was my only hope that the outside world would know for sure that I was there and I was alive. I had been in prison nearly 6 months at this point. It became a very, very real possibility. There might not be any conclusion. It just might go on forever until I died. But all of a sudden, everything changed. I heard gunfire and then a loud boom. That was a bomb. And then I heard a banging at the end of the cell block. Clearly, it sounded like really angry people. I thought they're gonna come in here and I'm gonna be killed. Then I heard this banging of the lock on the cell. I thought, okay, moments left before this cell door comes open. The first person I saw was a guy yelling something and pointing at a Quran. I thought this man was yelling some religious justification for what they were about to do to me. This was not going to be a quick death, not a gunshot to the head, because I was going to be killed by a mob. I was sure that this was the end for me. But then I realized that he was another prisoner. It was a prison break. I took a chance and went down the hall. The entire prison was escaping. It was a mass of blue prison uniforms flooding out of this prison. It was a surreal experience. And there was a part of me in the back of my mind that worried, what if this is just a dream? What if this is, not reality? Outside was a lot of gunfire. At that point, I realized that we were really escaping. We were achieving freedom. I was suddenly out in the streets of Tripoli, running with Libyan prisoners. The news was on, and Tripoli was falling to the rebel forces. Gaddafi was being defeated. This was a complete shock to me. When I saw our revolution flag flying in Tripoli. It was one of the most powerful things I've ever felt. That's what I had gone through all that for. It was truly something special. There was no way I was going to walk away from the revolution at that point. Being a prisoner of war, you know, if anything, my commitment to the cause had been strengthened. I'm glad that the job was finished. I wasn't going to leave until Gaddafi was out of power. So he's gone, so I'm home. One of my biggest fears, of course, in prison was that I had lost Lauren. You know, holding her in my arms again after all that time and not being sure if I ever would, and that she, you know, stood by me and she was proud of me and what I accomplished. I'd gone, fought in the war, we achieved victory, and I made it home. No matter what happens the rest of my life, that's going to be, nothing will top that.